Greetings, Carl.
Greetings, Michael. It's hard right now to ask, like, how are you? Because you really want to follow up with, like, really, and then we're into a 20-minute conversation, which is not the point of this podcast, but I hope you're well.
Doing well, doing well. I think we're all kind of in various stages of collective lockdown around the world. My reality for me, as conferences started getting canceled, my travel schedule kind of lightened up anyways. So in practice, I've just been holed up working from the home office for a while now because I don't really have other places to be at this point, and all the rest of my business work has already been virtual. So ironically, like, work from home was not the disruption for me because I ran the business largely virtually in the first place. But being home has certainly given a little extra time for conversations.
Yeah, for sure. For
Yeah,
sure. Yeah, I'm finding the same thing. Like, it freed up some travel, opened some time for some. I mean, the positive spin I'm putting on all this is that it opened up some time to get some projects couple things, some things I've been putting off, balancing books, opening a new bank account, reviewing some legal thing, whatever, and creative projects that I've been wanting to do and didn't have the space.
yeah,
So that's my positive spin.
yeah. But I feel like there's still this weird dichotomy that home life has sort of been oddly lifted by this, right? Like, when none of the kids' activities are happening, we're all home, and, like, as you're saying, like, we can actually start doing some of these projects and things around the house that were like things we would always get around to, but we never managed to get around to until you're basically not allowed to go out and do anything else, and all of a sudden there's a lot more time to do these things. But weekdays to me, I mean, just during the workday, I find is just feel like we're all collectively living on Zoom or GoToMeeting or whatever your video conferencing tool of choice is now, like internal business meetings, client meetings. It's just, I feel like I'm having more conversations now even than before because we're all relegated to this one conversation medium, trying to stay connected as best we can.
Yeah, I think it is really interesting. Lots of sort of dichotomy around all that. Tons of time with the family. Oh no, tons of time with the family.
Yeah.
Like tons of opportunity to connect. Oh geez, I'm over connected. Like, it's just it's a fascinating time.
But I,
You know, speaking of fascinating times, I wonder if we should chat a bit about maybe some of the conversations that are either happening or are gonna be happening, right?
yeah, I, just the way this is played out with the market decline, it just having been through these cycles, I started my career on the eve of the market crash in 9/11, like the tech crash in 9/11, bear market my first few years in the business, went through this in the financial crisis as well. And, I find there's this pattern that kind of plays out with client conversations that when bad stuff is happening and markets are down significantly, you get these like 30% plus declines. First of all, clients start imagining like it's going all the way to zero. So then we have to educate, like, no, it's not going to zero, but it is a pullback. This is a significant recession. Let me explain how these work and how they can recover and just kind of give context for it. But then this quickly comes back to what everybody really wants to at the end of the day, which is, am I okay? Like, are my goals okay or are they not? And I find in practice, the way these conversations usually turn out is like, it's moderately bad. And it's kind of where I'm like, the good news, it's not horrible. You're not going to be destitute. This isn't living under a bridge eating dog food. But this has been a big pullback. We're probably going to have to make some adjustments to stay on track. And
Yeah.
and I thought that would actually be interesting to talk about today. How do you break moderately bad news?
Mm.
Right? Like, you're going to be okay. It's not all destroyed, like everything's not over. But you're gonna have to make some changes. Like you are gonna need to tighten your belt, or I need to counsel you to tighten your belt. 10% pullbacks, sometimes clients overreact. But when you get pullbacks this big, like, yeah, I mean, we published some of the research around this as well in sequence risk. Like making some modest adjustments help. So how do you have these conversations? Like, how do you break this news? It's not as bad as you think, but it is bad and we need to make some changes.
Right. So to have this conversation, I think we should make clear we're making an assumption that we're talking to that group of clients, because there are some clients that like this is really
Yeah,
bad,
I mean,
right?
if they
Yeah,
were
and we can,
overconcentrated and they held everything in,
or they own
hotels and
seven, or
airlines
they
because
own,
they love the hospitality industry, we're at another level of problem here.
or they own 7 restaurants or whatever. But so let's assume we're talking to this group of people who are like, we had a plan, and now
We
the
had a plan,
plan,
we were invested, we were diversified. The market still had a
right,
hellacious decline. This
right,
hurts.
right.
What do we do now?
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's some really important stuff to talk about in terms of our own mindsets first, because I really think, you know, what's scare being in a situation. So first of all, it feels to me like this is the right time to be having this discussion, because it and who knows how long these things go on. Obviously, we have no idea as we're recording this, but there's this initial shock of just like, stay put, and then it's like, okay, come in, let's assess this, let's have a conversation about what's going on. We and as we're recording this, we're getting to that spot. Like, and again, I'm not assuming that the market's declined. I have no idea about that. I'm just saying we've had enough time now to get
Yep.
our feet under us, and now we can
Yep.
say,
The shell shock is worn off. We've done the initial round of like, don't panic still. We're going to
come
try
in,
to
let's
stay the
talk.
course. For better
Yep.
or worse, people have adjusted now to just the market's down a lot. It's still volatile. Scary stuff's still happening, but we're going to get through this
Yeah.
at some point.
Yep.
And I think you put it well. Like once a little time passes, right, the brain starts to shift. At some point, we're just trying to figure out, so what do we do from here?
Yep.
And that's the calls, at least that I'm hearing more now in the firm,
Yeah.
are
No, exactly.
we're past the talk you off a ledge. New round of scary stuff always ticks off a little more, but we're mostly past the talk you off the ledge. And now we're just into the, so what's the damage?
Yeah.
What happens now? What do we
Yeah.
do from here? And
Yeah.
the answer, I'm assuming, for a lot of clients is we're probably going to need to make some changes.
Yeah. So again, I think given all those assumptions, I think the really important thing to do here is just start with a mindset, because I think that sort of there's always, and I'm hearing it a lot right now, this sort of feeling of guilt, or like it's your fault, or you're embarrassed, or you did something wrong, right? Like, and all of those things, especially the audience we're talking to, like, that's not true, right? Like, you did good quality planning, and if you didn't, again, that's a whole different discussion. You did good quality planning, and these things happen. You knew they would happen. You didn't know when. And we again, setting aside for a minute the argument about this time different, whatever, like, you knew this would happen. So we need to sort of walk in and realize, like, I think we should kind of fire everybody. I'm firing everybody from the job that we thought we had, where it really felt like we were defenders of a map, right? Like we were defending a plan. And so therefore, if the plan was wrong, we were wrong. And I think the job we've had all along, but particularly we've been thrust into right now, is really more like a guide in a changing landscape with the tools to help you make decisions. And so if you come into the meeting with that approach, instead of sort of tail between the legs, I'm sorry we made these mistakes, more of like, hey, like, things are a little tricky. Because what's scarier than being in an uncertain environment? If you're on a guided trip with somebody, if like things go a little sideways, You know what's scarier than things going sideways? It's seeing your guide scared,
Right.
right? And so, and there's a fine line between being empathetic and then transferring your own anxiety to the client. And that's what I'm saying is, like, you gotta get that mindset right first, which is, hey, you're like, look, we've had some disruption here. It's a little crazy. You can use whatever, like the flight plan, turbulence, the mountain guide, like whatever analogy you want. And then, and if we come, but I'm here, got these tools in the backpack, we're going to figure it out. So why don't you come in and, how about next week? Let's come in and we'll sit down. And then when we sit down, we just have those. And I'm hoping, I'm making some assumptions again, that there's been some pre-commitment, like there's been some maybe lifeboat drill conversations around the levers that we have to pull, right? Because when these things happen, we all know the levers to get a plan back in target range, particularly if you're using Monte Carlo work, we know the levers. And the lever we all seem to rely on the most is asset allocation. Like, we'll just increase the equity exposure. But there's great research I saw last week, actually, at Abraham's, 2 weeks ago, at Abraham's conference here in the UK, around the last thing you want to do is change allocations, right? What's the the easiest lever, of course, is just die a little earlier.
Yeah.
I'm just like, can we just move the date?
Shortening the plan time horizon does make the plan look better.
No, that's one of my favorite, like, financial planner jokes. But really, it's contributions and withdrawals, right? Like, if you're in withdrawal stage, can we, and a lot of the work you've done, Jonathan Guyton's work, like all the guardrail work, like those conversations in some form have taken place, hopefully.
Does
that make sense?
It does. And I like the positioning and framing of just being proactive with clients to say, look, we had a plan, plans change, life changes, and plans have to adapt. So good news, I'm still here. I'm still ready to work with you. Let's sit down together and we're going to figure out what changes need to be made or not and how to move forward from here. Right. And just putting yourself in the position to say, I'm your guide. I'm here with you. We're going to figure this out together, which is, I think, both positive for looking forward and just, shifts what I know is the conversation that crops up with some clients. I mean, I've been on the receiving end of it as well, where they want to blame you. Like, you said I could retire 2 years ago and I did, and now look at what's happened.
Yeah. And again, like, it may be that we're a little, like, it may be the way which is why we've been talking about this shift from plan to planning for so long, right? Like, these things are easier if you've had these conversations. So we're sort of talking as if we're assuming that those conversations indeed had happened, and we can talk a little bit if they haven't later. But yeah, I think it's even like, that's what it means to be a leader. That's what it means to be a guide. That's what it means. Like, we had this conversation around rational overconfidence. And imagine an emergency room doctor, a critical care doctor, looking somebody in the eyes and saying, look, things have changed, but you come with me. Like, we're going to figure this out. That's my job. Now, when they get mad at you, which happens, I've been on the receiving end of those too, it's really just got to be empathy, right? Not this look like I'm washing my hands. So I don't mean it that way. I mean,
how do you handle that conversation?
If somebody's
Carl,
like, well,
you told me we were going to be able to retire, and now look what's happened. You've destroyed my family's livelihood.
Yeah. So there would be two ways. One would be to defend. Nobody knew this was coming. We built this plan, and look. The other would be to say, man, Michael, that sounds like, now I understand why you're so scared about this. Right. So we have a couple of choices here. Let's dig in. And I apologize if I ever communicated to you that the plan was set in stone, right? And then I would go back to the flight plan analogy. Like, what we have here with the plan is a flight plan, but when turbulent air shows up, we've got to make course corrections. And sometimes we get to make course corrections when we get there faster than we thought, right? And if you have some track record there, you may even want to talk about it. Like, and sometimes we have to make course corrections because things got choppy super fast. But the point is, you and I are still sitting in the pilot seat together, in the cockpit together. Like, let's grab the controls and get after it. So let's walk through a couple scenarios, right? So I think there's an element of empathy and then strength that's got to come, because you can't get defensive, because that won't work.
I like that framing. So just, Carl, what have you done to me? You told me I could retire and look at this. So you're in immediate with, wow, I can understand this. This is probably really scary for you.
So, scary is the word I like to use, but it could be like, yeah, man, you're right. Things have changed. This is painful. It's hard.
And then trying to move it forward. So yeah, I apologize if I communicated the plan was in stone. These have to be dynamic, but I'm here with you in the co-pilot seat. Like, let's get in here and figure out how to fly this thing forward, because we just got some really bad turbulence.
Yeah, and in that moment, you get to decide. Like, I always am playing chess around like a kind of I always joke, like a punch in the face or an empathetic hug, in terms of what kind of leadership somebody needs. But I think in these cases, it's not a problem to come in pretty hot after you've been a little empathetic and say, look, we're going to get through this, brother. Right? Like, you, me, like, and I got the tools. Yeah. We're going to get through this. And if it got even further, like, I would rather, instead of being defensive, I'd rather come on strong as a guide and say, look, my friend, I know you may be mad at me. I know we may be mad at the market. We may be mad at the circumstances. We may be mad at all this stuff. And I get it. And there's time for that. Like, if you need to go outside, like I actually said to a client once, I'm like, if we need to go outside and go a couple rounds, we can do that. Like, just sort of joking around. Like, if it would help, we could do that. You can go to the gym, whatever. But the last thing I'm going to let you and your family do is jump out of this lifeboat into the water. It's not going to happen on my watch. So let's get after it. Like, I know better than anybody you could find on the planet how to guide you through this situation, because I know you, and I got the best tools, and the stuff I don't know the answers to, I got a phone, and I can call. I mean, I know people to call, right? So let's get to work, right? So that's how. And again, we just went through a bunch of different stages of that, right? But you're the one that has to play that chess match with how strong you come across. But my point is, go in there as a leader, go in there as the guide, go in there with a little bit of rational overconfidence, a lot of empathy, take the blows, right? Like, they don't really think that you were the king of the world and had carved in stone from the mountain exactly what was going to work for the rest of your life, right? They're just a little mad at you right now. So then what do? Right? Well, pre-commitment conversations. Like, hey, remember we talked a little bit about this, that there would be some course corrections. And when we did, we have a couple options here, right? And then you get to walk through, could we, based on whatever, like, withdrawal, safety, sort of prudent withdrawal rules or guidelines or whatever, work you follow there, look, could we cut back a little bit? Could we increase equity exposure a little bit? Even though I think that should be the last thing you do, based on the research I just saw. We increase equity exposure a little bit. Can we cut back a little bit? Can we put off that? You had that trip plan next week, or sorry, you had that trip plan 6 months from now.
Well, I say next week you probably won't get to go anyways.
You've already canceled. Yeah, no, you could say that. Good news. Good news. All that stuff you were planning on spending money on has been canceled. We're fine.
Yeah, and I mean, ironic, but there's, I think there's really some truth to that. Right, a lot of budgets are adjusting naturally, just with so many people having spent time or still in work from home, shelter in place environments. Like, spending tends to go down. I mean, we can try to order more from Amazon and delivery, but our consumption tends to go down when we're not able to be out and traveling and doing the activities that we do. It actually naturally starts to rein in spending a little.
Well, and I think that's why the word you use, dynamic, is so important, right? It's like, we don't, like, that's exactly, like, who would have ever thought that I'm living off my Social Security, and that I got a little pension, and then I'm pulling some money out of my plan with you, Michael, and you know what, we are not spending as much.
Yeah.
Well, that's called dynamic.
Yeah. Well, and the irony to me as well, we published a lot of research around this, that we're also just really bad at figuring out what it takes to get us back on track. I find clients, well, either they sort of want to deny the reality and they don't want to make any changes, and we have to break the news to them like, yeah, we're gonna have to make some adjustments. Or they go the other end and they go too extreme, and it's like, okay, we got to cut all of our, we got to cut all of our spending, we got to sell our house, we got to make all these drastic lifestyle changes. And the reality that we find is just, even when you go through significant pullbacks like this, so as I call them, like small but permanent cuts are actually way, way more effective than drastic temporary cuts. Like the go-to for most people, like, okay, we're gonna, market's down so much, we're gonna cut our spending by 30% for the next 2 years. Like, we're gonna really tighten our belts and try to rein it in until we get back on track. But when we look at the research on this, what I find said, like, here, let me give you an alternative option. Don't take your inflation adjustment this year.
Right.
Which for most people is like, well, that's
what are you talking about?
Nothing.
Yeah.
Well, like, okay, well, that's 2 or 3% of your spending. But if you remove that, that means not only do you spend 2 or 3% less this year, that means your baseline spending is now lower for every year in the future. Yeah. Which means if I trim your spending by 2 or 3%, that cuts 90% of a year's worth of spending over the next 30 years. Like, it's 3% a year added up for 30 years. If you cut your spending by 30% now for 2 years, that only trims out 60% of a year of spending. It's like you actually cut out more by doing a 3% shift you'll probably hardly notice than a drastic, life-changing 30% for 2 years waiting for things to get back on track again.
Totally. And that's purely just the impact of compounding, right? And I remember this so clearly in 2008-9, meeting with some clients, and yeah, we plugged in the numbers, and like, we were using a Monte Carlo tool at the time, and they had gone from like 92.7 to 89.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Like, it was, and yeah, and then we were like, wait, if we just make an adjustment like that, could you just not take your inflation increase for the next couple of years, as long as like, one of the old, like, if markets are down, you don't take the inflation increase. If they're up, you do.
Yeah.
And then the thing to remember too is, just like we're making this adjustment on the downside, we're going to have this meeting again. Like, positive surprises happen. We're going to have this meeting again sometime, I have no idea when, where we're going to say, hey, we could afford to give yourself an inflation adjustment, or we can give you a small raise now.
So,
right. And I think we're just managing in that range when you're talking about 20 or 30 years, right? So that's exactly what I would do, is I would greet with empathy, be a leader, and then get down to brass tacks, the work that you do. Like, let's talk about real specific things that we can do right now. Look at this impact. And by the way, my experience has been exactly yours. There never is, in this category of client that we're talking about, they're never as big and drastic as we thought. I mean, it might still be painful. We don't want to downplay it.
Yeah.
But like you're taking the controls at that point and saying, look, here's things we can do, things that you're in control of.
Yeah. Well,
that to me
is the part that's powerful. Like, let's get away from the part we can't control, which is what the market does or did to us. Let's get back to the stuff we can control. How are we going to change our spending and behavior to make sure that we stay on track, and recognizing it might actually not need to be as drastic as you fear. Right now, I mean, I know just people are like, the market's down so much, like, I'm afraid to, take the same spending from my portfolio. I'm like, you're spending like 3 or 4%. The last 0.2% of your withdrawals is not going to be the make or break for your portfolio for the next 30 years. Like, it doesn't actually impact that much. I mean, if you were spending 10 or 20% of your portfolio, yes, but when most clients end up spending 3, 4, 5% of their portfolio, because some of the spending is Social Security and other things that aren't fluctuating, the actual impact of continuing your spending is way less than most people realize.
Totally. I agree. Like, yeah, small tweaks made over a long period of time make a massive impact. It's the same story we were preaching about saving $50 a month when they were 18.
Yeah. Now, I do have to ask, as someone that I know has kind of professed not being a big fan of the plan, right? Like the printed plan in the first place. How do you facilitate this conversation? Like now, do you print a plan and start showing them scenarios? Would you put the planning software up on a screen and do it interactively? Do you prefer to just do this as a conversation? Let's just talk about the things we can't control and the things we can control and try to just
Yeah, yeah.
get them mentally there. Like how do you try
No,
to facilitate this conversation when you said, you know, come on in and we're gonna co-pilot this together, and they come in and now you got to deal with it.
yeah, you find the best tool you can to play what if scenarios. Like, and if you can do that interactively, amazing, right? And those tools are now becoming more and more available and better. Like you and I talked about this in the past. There's still some work to be done there, but there's tools to do. Yeah. So if you can do that live, like, hey, look at what happens when we make this adjustment, right? And you can see that happening. That's amazing. It's amazing. And we got to clear something up. I'm not a fan. I don't, I think you're still using the same tools. You're just communicating it a little different. Even this conversation is different than what most, remember, like the framework you went into is like, we had this plan. And what you're changing is like, no, I'm a guide. Like, let's jump in the car. Let's go. Right. Like, and I think if you've got tools to do that, yeah, the more interactive, the better, I think. Don't you think?
Yeah, I to me, this is where doing planning software more interactively and collaboratively shines, whether you're in like
Yeah.
Money Guide Pro's Play Zone or eMoney's Decision Center. You know, when you can put it up on the screen, like, look, here's where you were. We're going to grab the little, you know, portfolio value slider and drag it down a bit because we got hit. Okay, let's see what happens to the plan. Now let's start what ifing. Like, okay, you trim a couple % off your spending for going forward. Let's look at what that does. Oh, you want to do a more drastic cut, but temporarily? Okay, let's see what that does. Oh, it didn't even help as much. You want to change your asset allocation? Let's see what that does to it, right? We can start understanding and seeing real time, like what are the levers? Which levers actually impact the most? Because we're often not very good intuitively at figuring out which levers are actually powerful and which are not so powerful. And it just, to me, very, very directly facilitates the conversation. Okay, we can see now which levers lead to improvement, which ones lead to less improvement. Okay, of the ones that really drive change that you can control, which one do you want to grab and pull right now?
Totally.
And see exactly on the spot what happens.
Yeah, so good. And I think let's just point, because we kind of pointed at it a couple times, like pre-commitment. Like now, and again, no.
Yeah, how
like,
do you
none of us
wrap
should,
up this meeting as we kind of wrap up? Like how do you wrap up this meeting when you've gone through, you've broken the moderately bad news, good news, there are some things you can control and you don't have to, you know, completely destroy your lifestyle. Bad news, we do have to make some changes. We've modeled them in the planning software. You're going to make this asset allocation change and this spending cut. So we're now kind of wrapping up the meeting. So how do you close? Like, how do you finish this meeting?
I think we just emphasize that this is an ongoing dynamic situation, right? Planning is ongoing and dynamic, and we write out a prescription. I call it a one-page financial plan. You can call it an executive summary. Here's the things we decided today. Did I get this right? We're going to do this and this and this. Here's the changes we can control. We both looked at the impact that had. We all three of us or four of us, whatever, looked at the impact that would have. Here's where we've agreed. So here's the plan going forward. And then I also love to identify what the triggers would be that would facilitate revisiting it. Because remember, we all loop on these things, right? So if we can already say something like, it may just be a time, like, let's revisit this in 30 days. Let's revisit this in 3 months. It may be a market situation. You know, your client may have some business volatility that they're like, hey, if this changes, call me, right? We'll have you back in, we'll do. So I love identifying what would be the triggers for revisiting this, because that gives them permission to set it aside unless one of those things happen.
Yeah.
And when they start looping on it, they can pull that executive summary out you wrote and go, oh yeah, I don't have to think about that. We've already decided. Like, that's such a gift.
Yeah.
If you can give them the ability to go, I don't need to think about that right now. I've already decided, because they're going to revisit this 100,000 times when their neighbors are like, right?
Yep. Yeah, I love the triggers conversation
Yeah.
of, when does it matter? To me, like, I I think this is part of why we tend to get so many phone calls from clients, and particularly the nervous ones, because we get caught in this trap. Uh Carl, the market's down a lot. Are we okay? Yeah, we're okay. Carl, the market's down more. Are we okay now? Yeah, we're okay. Stay the course. Carl, the market's down more. Are we okay now? Yeah, we're okay. Carl, the
Yep.
market's down more. Are we okay now? Oh no, it's too far. You're screwed. Like, we got to make drastic change. Right? Like,
Right, right.
clients, so at some point, if they keep calling, you're gonna say, oh no, we're past the stay the course stage now. Like, you're gonna have to make changes. They're probably drastic. But they don't know where that line is. Right? We're not good
Right.
at doing compounding retirement income sustainability math in our head. So when they don't know where the threshold is, they just keep calling. It's like pulling the lottery, pulling the slot
Sure.
machine arm. Like, they just keep pulling the arm until they find out it comes up with something that they got to do. So when you give them a trigger, like, look, as long as your spending stays in the 4 to 5% range, you're fine. You're spending $80,000 a year, so as long as your portfolio is above 1.6 million, we're okay. So right now you're still at 1.8. So if it continues to bounce around and you're still above 1.6, you don't need to worry. You don't need to make any adjustments. If you go below 1.6, here are the spending changes we can make. They're fairly modest. You're going to trim a vacation back, and you're going to trim your budget by 3%. So if you hit 1.6, that's the change you're going to make. It's not disastrous.
Yep.
And so once that gets communicated, I find the calls also slow way down. People who are just nervous it's going to zero still need to be comforted. Like, no, the economic system is not imploding upon itself. Like, we will be okay. But you get out of this trap of, they keep calling because they know eventually you're going to tell them it's bad news. And if they have no idea where the trigger is, they just keep calling to find out if now is the time, having no idea whether they're even actually close or not. If you just give them the trigger points, here's when something will have to change, and here's what the likely change would be. Parentheses, it's not even actually as bad as you think, but it will be a change. The stress levels go down a lot. Right? I can't tell you with certainty if it's going to happen, but I can tell you with certainty when you're going to need to make a change and what change it will take.
Yeah, and it's really funny. Like, this isn't some, like, made up process that you and I have stumbled upon, right? Like you may do that intuitively, I may do it intuitively, but there's research around how to make decisions in complex and uncertain environments. And that research essentially says we solve for the next local optimum, and then we reset. And the reason we reset is because by taking a step, new information will become available. So we should be communicating it that way. Like, look, here's the information we have now. Based on that, we're going to take these steps. Here's the new information that could become available that would warrant a change. And we're calling that a trigger. And we're not communicating like, by the way, the plan's set in stone. Like, here we're using language around, if these things happen, we're going to get back together and figure it out. Right. So yeah, it's beautiful. Like, that's really, really good work. Hey, man.
Well, appreciate the discussion, Carl. I hope this is food for thought for everyone as we're going through these conversations now. As you said at the beginning, as we get past the, is it all going to zero? Like, no, we'll get through this. And we get into the, okay, I get it now. My portfolio took a hit. What do we do now? What comes next? And we start having these updated plan projections or conversations that this is what we're focusing on. So try not to defend, just empathize, and move them as quickly as you can to, I'm the guide. We'll figure this out together. Let's get in there and start changing the things we can control and figure out how we get back on track.
Amen, man. Thanks, Michael.
Thank you, Carl.